Soon we start hearing about several sexual scandals all over the place, and that even the religious groups are not exempt of responsibility on it. There are some disturbing questions which the genuine Jehovah's Witnesses must ask to themselves. Why so much sexual abuse scandals are blowing from inside the Jehovah's Witnesses organization? Are there any leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses involved that they want to cover up? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. If we hear the words of Barbara Anderson, who served in Bethel for many decades as writer and researcher, we will understand who exactly is behind such horrendous crime.
Years later, after this, they were triggered, and they remembered what happened to them, and it was men in positions. It wasn't the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses. It was men in positions that molested them.
Now, who from the Jehovah's Witnesses leadership are involved in such sinful conduct? For example, let's observe the case of the forgotten Leo Greensleeves. Who was him? And why he was forced to resign as a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses governing body? Was he a sex abuser? Leo Greenlees entered in Bethel service in Canada in 1936. Once he was a Freemason, he quickly became the treasurer of the Canadian branch and for the IBSA of Canada. Once Nathan Knorr was also a Freemason, he invited Greenlees to serve in Brooklyn headquarters. And 1 year after he was elected member of the board of directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. When the governing body was formed in the 70s, he became automatically a member, and was eventually used to speak in Gilead graduations, international conventions and zone visits. A Watchtower of 1982 mentioned him as being part of the teaching committee of the governing body. However, something was wrong with him. By the year 1984, Leo Greenlees was invited by the rest of the governing body to resign from his position for sexually molesting a small boy inside Brooklyn Bethel. Parents had reported it to the members of the governing body, who were forced to take action, even because it wasn't the first time he had molested a child. However, because Greenlees was a Freemason, he couldn't be disfellowshipped, nor any judicial hearing took place. But instead he was assigned as special pioneer to a congregation in downtown New Orleans, Louisiana. Leo Greenlees served briefly in that congregation as elder and special pioneer, until he stepped down and moved to California, where he died of a stroke in 1988. He is buried in Modesto, California. An interesting fact is that the boy who Greenlees had raped applied for Bethel service a few years later, but was rejected. The Watchtower Society was afraid that other Bethelites would know about the incident, and that the case would become scandalous, mostly because no sort of justice had been made.
By telling you that my mother and father both spoke, wrote, and read fluently the Finnish language. Okay? And the Watchtower Society didn't have any Finnish-speaking people in Brooklyn. They had them at their branch office in Finland, but not in Brooklyn. And there was a lot of correspondence from Finland in the Finnish language. So, extremely sensitive matters within the organization. And I remember my parents sitting there and translating it into English, and many times they had to take a trip down to Brooklyn Bethel. I would go with them, and they would be with the service department or the writing department, doing a translation. And sometimes it was vice versa. They would give it an answer from the service department, and my parents would have to translate it into Finnish and send it off to this individual. So, anyway, while I was down there with them on one occasion, I was out wandering around a little bit, and this man came to me, took me to his room, and he sexually molested me in Bethel. And for years I didn't know his name. I did not know who he was, but I used to see him get up on the stage and give public talks and everything. And then, I don't know, I was about 40, 45 years old, and somebody mailed me some photographs with the names. And there was Percy Chapman, Leo Greenlees, and several others. I saw Leo Greenlees' picture, and I said, that's the man. Now I have a name to go with the face. And Percy Chapman was also kicked out of the Watchtower. Nothing was ever done to Leo Greenlees. In fact, he was never disfellowshipped. They just shipped him out to the Midwest somewhere, and it was also on record that he had molested more than just me.
Oh, no.
After listening to Mark Pallow's interview, we took note on the comment he did at certain moment. Let's hear it again.
Nothing was ever done to Leo Greenlees. In fact, he was never disfellowshipped. They just shipped him out to the Midwest somewhere, and it was also on record that he had molested more than just me.
Notwithstanding, we received recently an email from Barbara Anderson, who lived in Brooklyn, Bethel by that time, and told us exactly what happened. Thanks for the links. I had no idea how Mark Pallow looked like, and I never heard his story before. It is interesting to me that the story that I was told in Bethel is not Pallow's story, because the facts were different. The one I heard was about a 7-year-old boy molested by Greenlees when he stayed at the boy's parents' home one weekend during his zone visit. A few days later, the father of the boy showed up at Brooklyn Bethel and told his story to certain people in high positions, that Greenlees molested his son. The father said either you get rid of Greenlees from the headquarters, and take him off the governing body list, or I go to the authorities. Watchtower officials immediately complied. And all of us in Bethel heard an announcement after breakfast that Greenlees was no longer a governing body member, and was no longer in Bethel. There were no further statements. So, after learning that Mark Pallow was not the only victim, is there any other reports on Leo Greenlees' pedophilian conduct? We detected in the internet the exchange of emails between 2 potential victims and a third party. Let's read what exactly they say. For example, on Thursday the 25th of January 2001, a person named Paul Bonanno emailed someone named Alan the following statement. In the early 1980s, Leo Greenlees visited Malta with Brody, from the Canadian branch, on a zone visit. After his talk, Greenlees came at the back of the Kingdom Hall near the library where my brother and myself were, earlier in our teens. While talking to us, he started rubbing his hands on our back. Then he asked us to accompany him to his car, but my father happened to come. At that time for us it was a special privilege that a governing body member gave us that personal attention. Today we know why. Another internet user identified as Mike emailed to someone named Caesar, on Wednesday the 28th of December 1994. He wrote, "My dad and my brother used the same Jehovah's Witness accountant. He mentioned that Greenlees had an interest in his son, about 7 years old, and after leaving the room for a while he came back and found Greenlees' hand on his son's thigh. His son was wearing shorts. The witness freaked out, and to this day he believes that Greenlees is a child molester. Although he did not touch the child's genitals, he certainly acted improperly. Well, we know that to become a governing body member one has to be anointed, but in this case, would you think that any anointed man would behave like this? And the fact that he was a Freemason doesn't surprise us to learn that he never was disfellowshipped from Jehovah's Witnesses organization. But Greenlees' case was not unique. Please check the part 2 of this video in which we will discuss the life and crimes of another member of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, who securely was also a child molester.